Polanski. Can you hear me?
Today on Flix Freaks, we're reviewing The Coldest Game, starring Bill Pullman, Lotte Verbeek, and Robert Więckiewicz, directed by Lukasz Kosmicki. During 1962's Cuban Missile Crisis, a troubled math genius finds himself drafted to play in a U.S. Soviet chess match and a deadly game of espionage.
I thought it was halfway decent, actually. The main character's name is Joshua Mansky. He's an ex-professor, and he's just insanely intelligent. And the film did a really good job with selling his intelligence.
For myself, I was never really a huge Bill Pullman fan. But in the last, I'd probably say 10 years, as he's gotten older and he's really developed his craft, I've come to like a lot of Bill Pullman's work lately. So this was one of them. That's one of the reasons I was excited. And in playing this this mathematician, genius, scientist guy, Joshua Mansky, I think he pulled it off really well. The antagonist, General Krutov, played by Aleksey Serebryakov.
He felt very Bond villainy to me. I don't know.
Didn't he? I liked it. I liked how he had that Bond villain. He had his own agenda. He was anti-American, anti-democratic. Believed that the Soviet way, the USSR way of life was the best way of life, which is, obviously fine for him, but it seemed like he was willing to destroy the USA and democracy by any means necessary.
I was not sold on him. He's evil, maybe, he sounds Russian, and he talks Russian, and he sounds Russian again, and he does the knife game, and he snarls sometimes.
But you didn't think he was that evil? You didn't think it was that believable, like he was pretending to be evil?
Yeah.
But going back to the story plot, one of the things that really caught my attention was I liked the build-up into Act 3, and then when they played that twist. So they had this 24-hour TV show thing going where they show you what's going on currently, and then they backtrack it 7 days earlier, and then they do this. They almost do the same exact sound. So I don't know if it was like an homage to the show 24 or something like that. But then they do 7 days earlier and 6 days and 5. They do this countdown all the way to where you're sitting back at the opening scene where Bill Pullman is at the chess table on the final match, and he's got the blood on his hand. And then it takes it from there. And that was the opening. That was Act 3, and I liked the twist that moved into that act where you're really hooked on. I was really hooked on wanting to figure out. It's like, well, who was actually the bad guy? Who was the secret agent? Who's screwing over who here? That type of thing.
Yeah, I thought all the plot twists were done very well. I had my own skepticism on like characters like the whodunit. And I pegged the right character, but for the wrong reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of different twists, and that's one of the reasons why I think, for myself, espionage movies like this can be really fun, is because it is like a chess game in the fact that you're moving pieces around, and you don't always necessarily have a clear idea on what is going on until until a piece is actually sacked, or until you get that check or that checkmate or something like that. And that's what's fun about espionage movies, because there's so many moving parts to it and then you need to get, filled back in later on. So that was great. One of the things I liked that the filmmaker and the storyline did is I was always led to believe, like in any good espionage movie, is that you never know who's going to be the bad guy and who's going to kill who. So when you have those little moments of a push in on a camera angle, when you have a push in or a pull away because you're detaching or something like that, or the actor just looks a certain way, or like you had said, it's like, oh, here's the cigarette, and it's like, oh, that's laced, isn't it? And it's going to kill him. He's going to die a horrible death. Or for example, when when the flask is given, when the drink is given, when they start putting these things like, hey, look at this, and you're like, ooh, look at that. I wonder if that's going to factor in later on. And it may factor in majorly, or it may factor in, minorly, and they just kind of let it go a little bit. So that constant build, a little bit Alfred Hitchcock, that constant build of suspense, which is I really like in films. So yeah, I like the cinematography. I think it was just fine. I think the color grading fit the mood. There wasn't anything that was that I caught that I was like, ooh, that was off, or oh, they screwed up here, oh, this sucked, or I felt detached. I actually felt pulled in a little bit. So and that's good camera work and good angles and pushes and pulls and dollies, and then also the coloring and then the music behind it. As you said, you really enjoyed the soundtrack. I like the soundtrack. I think
It was very
I think
fun.
it was. It was
Yeah.
a fun soundtrack. It wasn't. It wasn't as I don't know. It could have been a lot more somber, I guess, and a lot more depressing because of the time. But I thought it actually was fun and interesting. It was an interesting choice.
But I thought the film moved quite quickly from like scene to
The flow.
scene, event to event. I thought it moved fairly quickly. Um, there was that bit in the middle when Joshua, God, what was his name?
Mansky.
Joshua Mansky. God, I just watched the film. Joshua Mansky and the director, they get together and they get drunk. I thought that was the only time the film kind of slowed down a little bit. Other than that scene, I felt like it was quite quick, but it wasn't to the point where it was like super choppy and
Yeah.
your brain is working overtime to try and process everything.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think it had a nice steady pace to it. It did slow down for that scene with the when the professor and the director were getting drunk and swapping stories, but also I think there was a real purpose behind that as well, because remember later on when people started dropping like flies and Bill Pullman's character started having an issue with it, and he's talking to Donald Novak, the U.S. agent in charge, and he was telling him, like, these are human beings, these are people, and they have lives, and he's giving him that little speech, and he's having this internal conflict of what he's doing and what needs to be done. He's trying to process that. And I think that scene earlier with him going to the bombed, non-rebuilt side of Warsaw, and seeing the damage that was done by the Nazis and the remnants that was left over, and then hearing the director's story on how not only is it left over in the city, but it's left over in his mind and in his heart. He's reliving that memory of, again, fighting off these Nazis from this household of women and children, as if he was standing right there in the house and it was going on right there. So I think that was an important scene for the development of Bill Pullman's character later on. Yeah, if you like spy films, obviously I would recommend this. If you are a James Bond fan, or almost a James Bond fan, I'll be honest, I'm actually not really that much of a James Bond fan. If you like James Bond films, I think this is a movie that James Bond fans would like. If you're a Bill Pullman fan, if you thought he did a good job as the President in Independence Day, you might like this movie. Let's be honest, compared to some of the crap Netflix has actually either purchased or put out and sponsored themselves, this one was actually pretty good. I think the average Netflix fan, if you like Netflix films, I think you're gonna like this one. So personally, I give it a thumbs up. What about you? What Netflix rating would you give it?
I give it thumbs up.
All right.
You brought me here and I'm going to play chess. I'm playing my own game.